All right. Hi, everybody. I just want to do a quick little video on completing the square. So I think you can see this. Completing the square is all based around something called a perfect square trinomial. Okay. Now, a perfect square trinomial is something that looks like this. Okay, so that's a perfect square trinomial because it can be represented as a binomial that is squared. So you've got x squared plus 6x plus 9. And if I were to FOIL that out, in other words, do x plus 3 times x plus 3, that would give me this function right here. Okay, now there are a couple ways to figure out if something is a perfect square trinomial. For instance, you can actually take this term right here. We're not going to worry about a terms. So you can take this and generalize it as bx plus c. Okay, now if you look at this, and I know this is a 6 and a b, but this is a 6, this is a b. And if you take this term right here, b, and you divide it by 2 and you square it, that should equal c, or the constant, right? So I've got a couple different color markers, like at school. So if I take this example with the 6, we would say 6 over 2 squared, and that is 3 squared, which is 9, and that is what C was. So that tells us that it's a perfect square trinomial, all right? Now, I'll show you another example of one. The beautiful thing about these videos is that you can just pause and rewind and go copy that down if you need to, okay? So another example would be if I took the expression x minus 4 and I squared it, and I got x squared minus 4x minus 4x plus 16. Remember, I could always do that visually on paper by FOILing out x minus 4 times x minus 4. But in the end, it's going to equal x squared minus 8x plus 16. So that is another example of a perfect square trinomial. So we can test that out. We can go back and we can say, all right, well, I take this term, negative 8, I divide it by 2, and I square it. And that should be equal to my constant. So this would be negative 4 squared, because negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4, and we get 16, and that matches up there. So we're good to go on that. So now, if only it were as easy as me asking you, is this a perfect square trinomial? The answer to that last one and the one we did before was yes. But now you actually have to be the person to figure out what that perfect square trinomial is. So I might give you a problem that says, like, let's see, x squared minus 10x plus blank, right? Now you have to decide what number goes there to complete this square. So the first thing you have to do is hone in on that middle term, and that's a negative 10. So I'll divide negative 10 by 2, and I'll square it, right? So we've got b divided by 2, and we square it. Okay, b divided by 2, square it. And this one turns into negative 5 squared, which is 25. So you take this 25 and you put it right there. And you can now say that x squared minus 10x plus 25 is a perfect square trinomial. So the only other question is, how do we write that as a nice little binomial squared? So you actually look back at whatever number you just squared, and that goes right there. Okay, so, and if we take a look here, and I think I can squeeze it in, we would just test that out. X minus 5 times x minus 5 equals x squared minus 5x minus 5x, and then negative 5 times negative 5 gives us plus 25. So that right there is indeed what we got right there. I just combine the negative 5x's. Okay, so that's what it means to complete the square. Now, there is one more step. So I guess that was example 2. I should start labeling these. Sorry. So this would be example 3. And example 3, we would maybe get something that looked like this. And they would say to us, complete the square. Okay, now, so you got to think about this for a second. You got to think back to what was important about the structure of the function we worked with before. Well, we really cared about that middle term, right? We always let that be a consequence, whatever the constant was. So here's the trick. We're going to take the 3 away, and we get x squared minus 10x, and I like to put a little blank there, and I say negative 3, and I'm going to add the plus blank on the right-hand side too. So someone might want to know, why am I doing that? Well, I have to make sure that if I'm going to add a number right here, I got to make sure I add that number on the right-hand side too, because I can't just haphazardly add numbers to one side or the next. I have to make sure that if I do something on the left, I do that same exact thing on the right. So we know from before that negative 10 divided by 2 squared is negative 5 squared, and that's 25, right? Oh, slide that over. Okay, so we know that. Can I get rid of this window? Let's see. Yes, I can. Perfect. Okay. So we know that the magic number here is 25. So I'm going to take that 25, and I'm going to switch colors on us again. But right, we're going to take 25 and we're going to put it right here. But we can't just add 25 to the left. We got to add 25 to the right. And then we can take this function, we can boil it down to x minus 5 quantity squared equals, and then you say negative 3 plus 25, that is 22. And you don't want equations to be equal to a number, you want them equal to 0. So we're going to say that x minus 5 squared, and then we'll just take that minus 22 over, and we get equal to 0. Okay? So that would be considered to be like completing the square for that given function. And I'd like to do one more example with you, and then I will post this video right away. So let's go with example 4 here. And let's say complete the square for this function. Okay, so what's good about it right now is that we know the middle term. You know what? I'm not going to use 6. I used 6 already. Let's use something more interesting. That darn 6. At this time in the class, I would usually say, does anyone have any ideas? Any ideas? Any ideas? I can't ask that now. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to say plus 12x. We'll keep the minus 17. But all right, so there we go. All right, so the first thing we got to do is check into that 12. We got to say, all right, if I take the 12 and I divide it by 2 and I square it, what is that? So we take 12 divided by 2, that's 6. 6 squared is 36. So we know that the magic number is 36. So I'm going to rewrite this equation as plus 12x plus a blank, and we're going to move that 17 over, and I can't just have the 17, it's got to have whatever the magic number is as well. So we take that number, we take 36, and we bring it right over here, and we say 36, 36. Okay, last but not least, we're going to take this function here, and we'll go with this whole thing. That has to get written as x plus, go back to this number, 6. 6 squared equals, and then 17 plus 36. Let's see, what's 17 plus 36? Add that, 6 plus 7, 4, 3, bring over 1, and that is 53. So we've got it equal to 53 there. And the last step is to say that x plus 6 squared minus 53 equals 0. Okay? So that is completing the square, and hopefully you can take a look at this video and then proceed down the assignments list like we'll talk about in office hours on Tuesday. All right. So I got to figure out how to get rid of this now. What do? I think I just press stop here. Perfect. All right. See everybody later.